Xenoblade Chronicles X, funny enough, was the last Xenoblade game I've played. This is kind of funny to me considering the fact that I didn't own a Switch a good year or two after it released, and I've had a Wii U for a lot longer. But when I eventually did get to play it, that was a whole 5 years later in the year 2020, and I know we're in 2021, but I did stop playing it a few months ago. And I can't really tell you why I didn't play it back then, considering the fact that I was already familiar with the series, and I did want to get it back in 2015, I just never did for whatever reason. And I was always interested from what I saw from the trailers and the gameplay stuff. But I can say I was super excited to play it, and say the fact that Xenoblade 1, 2, and Torna left really good impressions on me. So at least, there was some hype there. Also note with this video, there will be no mention of the multiplayer because frankly, I didn't really use that, and in current year, I doubt a lot of people would. But now it's a good time to get into the topic of the video, and one of the things I loved has to be the gameplay. It's similar to the first game where you actually get to pick from 8 arts in battle, but it differs from where you actually have a thing called soul voices. This lets you buff up one certain type of art depending on the situation, and this can be super helpful just because it either does more damage or just buffs up a certain art depending on, the situation. Like for example, if you're using a green art, it will just buff up that art for whatever it does. The game also has a bit more depth with, for example, each art having 2 cooldowns and 3 if you're on overdrive. This to me is kind of cool since you can either wait for the extra effects and combine with the soul phase to do more stuff, or you could just do the ult now for a quick buff. Then there's also overdrive, which buffs you up and gives you stronger effects for your ults. As I mentioned before, it gives you 3 cooldowns, so that can even be more devastating. It's insanely deep and really fun to mess around with, and it's definitely a nice change from the first game. I also love the graphics, and it looks amazing for a Wii U title. For the system, I think it's pretty detailed, and I love the models for the characters and just monsters and whatever else. I also think that the areas look pretty nice and are pretty massive, and frankly, I'm surprised Monolith Soft managed to make a game of this caliber and make it look as nice as it does for the system. I also found the game's world to be pretty great with how big it is and how explorable each of the areas are. And again, for the system, the size sure is impressive because frankly, it's just amazing, and I think of all the Xenoblade games, this one I love the most for its world. I just had fun running around and finding my way either with the scales or without, because whenever I didn't do it with the scales, I ended up just jumping from ledge to ledge just to hope I could get to the next point. And there were like 5 unique areas, and while it's far less than Xenoblade 1 and 2, it doesn't really skimp out on all the nice secrets. And once you get the flying ability with the scale, there's a bit more you actually can do in the sky, and frankly that's cooler to me. And while it does take a bit longer to get, I think it's worth it just because again, there's still a lot to explore even without the scales. I also did like the Infinity quests and even some of the normal quests because I think they can have some nice stories in them. I do remember this one with a scientist trying to get back to his era with a time machine in which he used to call, and I found that one pretty nice. But the Infinity missions can be a bit cooler because you directly get to interact with the playable characters a lot more often, and they can have some nice moments. You are also at least forced to do some of these throughout the story, but I don't mind this as much because again, you do get to interact with the characters a lot more often. Some of my favorites definitely had to be the Matchmaker, Tie Step Bind, and 9 Lives to name a few. The OST in this game I also extremely love, and a lot of the songs here definitely have to be some of my favorites from gaming history, and that's mostly because of the composer. If you don't know who it is, it's Sawano Hiroyuki, and I frankly think that he knocked it out of the ballpark with basically all the songs here, and I find them all to be just really fun to listen to and just really high energy for the most part. Even some of the small things like the cave theme, the minor boss theme, and the gangly and bass theme are really great, and I think they match the parts where they're used in. And of course, the battle themes I just love, and I just get into random fights for the most part just to listen to Uncontrollable and Black Tar. And I could definitely say for what I play of Xenoblade X, it's a fantastic game and I love it. And I would say it's one of the best Wii U games simply just because again it's super fun to play and the world is just really fun to explore. But even then, it doesn't do everything perfect sadly. And one of the aspects I felt wasn't as good was the story, which sucked considering the fact that Xenoblade 1, 2, and Torna had really great stories. I know that Xenoblade 2 and Torna came after, but I just think that makes it stink even more. But with Xenoblade X, I just feel a lot of the stuff with the humans and whatever else is just shoved near the end, like why the ganglions hate the characters. It just didn't feel satisfying to me, and most events in the story were just you fighting the ganglions without much build up to the climax. It's just, okay, we have to go fight the ganglions now, stop them, and that's pretty much it. I was also annoyed how the first few chapters was stretched out to be like 3 chapters because I kind of felt they could put it into like 1 or 2 chapters because it kind of just feels like tutorial to me. I also don't really love all the characters in this entry, and I found most of it to be just lackluster. They don't really get to have a lot of screen time other than characters like Lin, Elma, Tatsu, Lao, and the protagonists. And characters like Doug, Irina, and Glenn do get some action in Affinity missions, but they're mostly absent in the main story missions other than cutscenes. And I think this sucks because if it wasn't for the forced Affinity missions, again, we don't really get to see them all that much. And while I kinda liked what we saw of Lao and Elma, I still kinda wish we got to see more of, say, Elma, for example, because she has a lot of really cool stuff that I think can be expanded upon. And I do kind of hope that if this game does get a port, Monolith actually gets to go back and add a lot more stuff for the characters, because there's a lot there with the Affinity missions and whatever else. It's just that, there's not much in the main story for them. And also the game's equipment system I also found to be a lot grindier than the other games. And frankly, with the stove, for example, it just gets really annoying because, say, for example, if you can buy something, you might not be able to equip it because your character's level is too low. You can do that or get it from enemies, and even then that can kind of be annoying because the drop rate might be really low. And I know this is similar to the first game, but it feels more grindy here, and I feel part of that is because the game was also kind of meant to be played online. I have no idea, but that's my guess. Also, the tutorials here aren't really the greatest, and it's kind of like Xenoblade 2 where the in-game ones just have a passing mention them, or it just doesn't give you all the information. And you basically have to go in the electric manual in the game or just look up guides on the internet. And honestly, again, that sucks. And considering the fact that this was for like 2 entries in a row, I don't know how Monolith messed that up. But overall, I would still recommend this game both to people who never played a Xenoblade game and those who have. Again, this is mostly just because the gameplay and the world, I think it's great, and I think it would hold anyone's attention for really long. And while yeah, it's not the greatest story-wise, I still think there's plenty of fun elsewhere to be had. I kinda do wish Monolith Soft did get enough time and money to port it to the Switch, because I think a second shot would help make a lot of the game's issues a lot less worse. But I have no idea when that's going to happen, so we're just going to have to stick with the Wii U version, and that's not bad. It's just that that's the only version we got unless you emulate it. But I really want to hear what you guys liked and disliked about this entry. Let me know in the comments below. And of course, before the video ends, I will go over my own likes and dislikes. Likes: fun and deep gameplay, amazing graphics, pretty big world, and it's pretty explorable. Affinity / side quests can be pretty fun, and the OST is amazing. Dislikes: story isn't as good, most characters are underdeveloped in the main story, equipment is pretty grindy, and the tutorials aren't that good. Thank you all for watching, and don't forget to like the video, and also follow me on Twitter, link in the description, and don't forget to subscribe.